Hello and welcome friends to another watercolour tutorial. My name is Morgana and today I'll be demonstrating this beautiful pastel coloured lovely dawn landscape. So the first thing I've done is I've taped a piece of watercolour paper to my board at a roughly 45-degree angle. This is Saunders Waterford 100% cotton cold press paper. The cold press just means we get some lovely texture on the paper that's going to pick up the paint really nicely. And all I've done is just tape a piece of masking tape about 2/3 of the way down to just block off the horizon line there so I can get started on the sky. And you can see the first thing that I've done for the sky is, apart from wetting this top part of the paper all over in preparation, I'm now throwing on some very pale raw sienna paint, almost like a base colour really. This will help to give the sky a lovely glow. As we're doing a dawn scene, I want that lovely faint glow of the impression of a rising sun coming up from the left side. Now to complement the raw sienna, I'm using some Opera Rose pink. This is from the Winsor & Newton Professional Watercolour range. The raw sienna is part of the Winsor & Newton Common range, so they're both Winsor & Newton paints, and they work really beautifully together. I think you can see using plenty of water I'm able to blend them in really nicely. We're starting to get a really lovely colour here. The brush I'm using, if anybody is interested, is a Princeton Neptune synthetic modeler brush. It's 1 inch in size, but you can get larger if your heart desires. It's a really good and versatile little brush. I use it an awful lot and it hasn't broken on me yet, so it's nothing but good things to say about this little brush. And you can see I am using it to now blend in a little bit of blue, just to bring that sky down along the top. For the blue, I'm using Winsor Blue from the Winsor & Newton Professional range, which I think the pigment colour also goes by other names in other brands. I think it's known as Phthalo Blue in other ranges. I'll pop a full list of my paints and bits in the video description below if anybody's interested in looking anything up. But you can see here I'm just using my brush to really start working those colours in together. You can see how pale it is. I'm quite pleased with this because it's easy to be heavy-handed with these colours, especially the Winsor colours. Some of them are so bright. You know, this Opera Rose, when it comes out of the tube, it is it is so pink. So the one I'm using here, I've diluted it down quite a bit. I don't want a neon sunrise. A beautiful blushing dawn is what we're looking for. And now all I'm doing is using a folded piece of tissue to gently lift out some clouds. You can see there just how easy it is. You just run that edge of the tissue along the paint while it's still wet. You don't want to do too many sort of hard straight lines. You can see I've sort of, I'm wobbling my hand around a little bit. There we go, just fold it to it's a nice crisp edge, and then gently sort of wiggle it across the paper to create these lovely impressions of beautiful, wistful sort of drifting clouds coming across the top of the sky here. You can see just how effective this tissue is whilst the paint is still wet. Just pulling these lovely little streaks out, trying to get it to look really pretty, delicate and natural. However, if you do make any mistakes, make sure it's clean, and damp brush, only very lightly damp, almost dry. You can see just swept across the paint there while it's still wet, has just vanished those white lines. Just wasn't keen on the placement of that there, so you can see I was able to just sweep them away. This must be done quickly, I will add. This isn't something you can go back to. I would definitely advise being prepared mentally to do this straight away as soon as you've put your wash on. Have your tissue ready and then just really go for it. There we are, satisfying part, peeling the tape off there, getting rid of any excess water that might have dripped down. Got a couple of little scuff marks there, probably from over-enthusiastic brushing, but that doesn't matter too much because we're going to dry brush this section now, so those marks won't really matter at all. Mostly the tape was there just to make sure I got a nice clean horizon line. And again you can see I'm using my lovely Neptune brush. This time it's not fully loaded up with water. This is a brush that can hold a significant amount of water and paint, but I've just sort of dunked it a little bit so it's lightly damp, and I'm just running it in long sweeping strokes across the lower part of the paper here, making sure to leave some white paper. You can see I'm leaving plenty of white just to give the impression of the sparkle reflection on the foreground. This lovely dry brush sparkle giving the impression of the light, of the fresh dawn light. And now you can see again the versatility of this lovely brush. I'm using the chiselled flat edge to just go along this horizon line with a little bit more opera rose and put in a distant tree line, whilst the top part, the sky, is still wet, so I'm allowing a slight diffusion of this colour. You can see it's just slightly starting to blend into the sky. You get that lovely soft edge that you wouldn't get if I'd allowed the sky to dry too much. Now just using a damp fan brush to try and pop in a few extra little details. Just quick, gentle upward strokes of the brush. These lovely fine delicate lines just to give the impression of trees in the distance, little branches poking up here and there, not in too much of a uniform line. You can see I've just pulled it slightly up towards the right, and now I'm just dry brushing the fan brush over the paper, just very careful, gentle little strokes. Again, you can see how light I'm being, and just throwing in a little bit of shadow. And here we are, the paint has all dried now. I went off and dried it with a hairbrush, threw in a little bit more dry brushing on the left side, you can see, but I've still left lots and lots of white paper. I want this to be a lovely light painting. And now I've mixed up a little bit of the Opera Rose and the Windsor Blue to make this fabulous purple colour. And I'm using a brush to just put in a beautiful tree here. This is a sword brush, or dagger brush, I believe they're also called, because of the shape. You can see it's quite thick at the top and comes down to this lovely point, which you can use to get some really, really fine lines, but also some thicker lines if you press harder. You can see that I'm using it almost the same way that you'd use a calligraphy brush to get some hard lines, some soft lines, some thick lines, and some very, very thin lines. It also carries a lovely amount of paint, so you can do some very long lines with this as well, without having to constantly go back and dip your brush into the paint over and over again. If you don't have one of these brushes, you can also use something, as I said, like a calligraphy brush, or a rigger brush also would be wonderful for this. They're very long, thin brushes. Again, they hold a decent amount of water and paint, so you can get those lovely long lines. I just happen to, this is a new brush for me, so as you can see, I'm using it for basically everything, but I think it works. Of course, you don't have to use a specialised brush to do this tree, just use whatever brush you fancy, a round or a flat. Just might take a little bit longer because you can't carry as much paint in them, so you just have to keep going back and dipping in more often. But yes, certainly use whatever brush you want to put in this fabulous winter tree. You can see as well that I'm not following a pencil guide or anything like that. In all honesty, when I started this, I wasn't sure quite what tree to put in there. It was originally going to be a fir tree, then it changed to a willow tree, and now it's, well, I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's a very pretty tree, I think. And I'm just enjoying putting in all those tiny little branches with the fine point of the brush. You can, of course, do whatever tree you see fit, or if it makes it a little easier for you, feel free to pencil in the tree before you start on the sky wash, because then you've got a line to follow, and I find that sometimes gives me a bit more confidence when I'm painting. And now you can see I'm just using the very, very fine point of this brush to go into the tree line and just add a little bit of detail. I don't want too much, obviously, because it's supposed to be a distant, misty tree line, so any thick lines or dark detail would look a little strange and out of place. So I'm just going in and using the very, very tip. You can also use a very, very sort of fine round brush or a flat brush, anything you've got really that comes to a nice fine point. And I'm just putting in a few extra sort of little wispy lines and details and adding to that impression of a lovely distant tree line. Now coming in again with the fan brush, just to stuff in a little bit of shadow underneath this tree now, now that I know what tree it is. You can see it's as simple as that to just get the fan brush and just lightly brush the tips of it across this lovely textured cold pressed paper, and you can see how easy it was to just get a little impression of shadow underneath that tree. Using the same lovely sort of soft dusty purple colour that I've mixed from the pink and blue, I'm again using the sword liner, this time to put in some foreground grasses and just a little bit of extra foreground detail to really bring this painting together. And now I'm coming in again with some raw sienna and just going over some of these lines, introducing the lovely warm yellow colour into this purple, just to create a little bit of contrast and interest, and a little bit of just some interest in these grasses, a bit of variation in colour and tone, which is going to help them blend in beautifully with the rest of the painting here. You can see I'm just doing a lot of these lovely quick swipes with the sword brush. It lends itself really well to these kind of quick and spontaneous strokes, as well as the more sort of the longer and more measured strokes. You can see that these grasses are coming up really beautifully. I'm really happy with how sort of spontaneous and natural they're starting to look. And now for an extra little detail. Seeing as this wintry tree, you can see all its bare branches, I decided to put in some quick and simple bird's nests. You can see I'm just using the very, very tip of this brush and just doing lots of tiny little half strokes in the right shape. You want sort of a flat semicircle. You can see there that you could use any other brush. You could use any sort of fine brush for this, as long as you're careful. And there we are. It's literally as simple as that. Three sweet little bird's nests. And what do we need now, of course, but some birds. So I'm back to my fine detail brush for this. This is a size 4/0 miniature synthetic brush. It's got a lovely fine point, and for things like birds, it's got much more control than the sword liner. So I'm using it to just add in some lovely birds into the sky. Again, I want to keep the colours all harmonising beautifully, so I'm actually using the dark purple colour to add in the birds here. I'm taking care to make the distant ones a little paler and keep the foreground ones a little sharper. I should say darker in colour, seeing as they are closer to us, the imaginary viewer of this scene. Naturally the distant ones will be fainter, so I try and use a slightly lighter colour of paint. You can do this with some tissue, just dab if they are too dark. If the paint is wet and if you're careful, it will lift a little of the colour and just leave you with a lighter impression. I'm also putting in a distant flock above this tree line, just doing some very, very small little bird friends over there, because of course they are in the distance. And I thought that as this was a dawn painting, and so often you get the dawn chorus of birds rising from the trees with the sun, I thought it would be nice to put in a distant flock coming up from that tree line. I remember we used to live near where there was a colony of rooks that would rise very early with lots of noise with the sun to greet the day. So they could be rooks or perhaps starlings or whatever bird you like, really. So here we are. I'm happy with the painting. I've taken the tape off and signed it and called it finished. I'm really pleased with how this one turned out. I really hope that you enjoyed watching it as well. I love the wistful paleness of these dawn colours. I really enjoyed doing this, and I hope you enjoyed watching it as well. So thank you for being here. If you'd also like to help support this YouTube channel by popping over to my Patreon page and signing up there, you can do so for as little as £1 a month, and I'd hugely appreciate it. So thank you all again for watching. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you all, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in the next video.